Today, we go a bit wild as we play around with various techniques to see what we come up with. Welcome back to 999 Things to Cook. Sucker punch that like button right now as we start with filet mignon. We will season it with salt and fresh cracked black pepper. Make sure to season all sides of it very well. Normally I would use garlic powder and onion powder also, but there will be many flavors on the plate, so I'll skip those this time. I'm going to sous vide this, so it goes into a food saver bag and gets vacuum sealed before being submerged into a water bath, heated by an immersion circulator of exactly 129 degrees Fahrenheit. It will cook for 2 hours. In the meantime, we have a lot of work to do. I take an acorn squash and cut it in half. After removing the seeds with a spoon, it gets laid face down on a wire rack over a sheet pan into a 400-degree oven for about 40 minutes. While the squash is cooking, we break down the corn. I cut the bottoms off it because I want to carefully unwrap it this time. You know the little hairs that are annoying and get all over the place when you remove the husk? I'm saving those. I did cut off the hair on the top that sticks out because it's not nice and clean like the stuff on the inside. Remove all the corn off of the cob. I'm not actually using the corn in this dish. I'll cook it another day. I want the cobs. I'm just flavoring the stock with this, so I really don't want to waste the kernels on that. Cut the cobs into chunks and add them to a small pot. I did add a small handful of kernels to the pot because I couldn't help myself, maybe about a quarter cup, but there will be plenty of corn here to eat tomorrow. In goes chicken stock. You could also use milk for this. You don't need a lot of liquid, just enough to cover everything. Season it with salt because we always use unsalted stock so that we can control the salt levels as we see fit. The pot goes on a burner and let it simmer away until the squash is ready. A hard simmer is fine as long as you don't burn it. We are extracting the corn essence into the stock. Once the squash is ready, it's time to get the flesh out of them into a blender. You need to do this while they are still hot, so work quickly here. Use a spoon to carefully scoop the flesh out. Just make sure that no skin gets in there. When that's done, take your stock and strain it. We're going to add some of this to the blender, but before we do, I add a bit of butter. When making a puree, it's always a good idea to add a little fat to it. Now, when you add the stock in, only pour a tiny amount. You can always add more if needed, but if you thin it out too much, you are in trouble. There are ways to fix it if you mess up, but just do it right the first time. I added small amounts of stock until it was a nice creamy consistency. I even added a little olive oil. The fats give the puree a nice glossy shine to it. It should look like this when it's ready. Nice and creamy and silky smooth. Since there is a bunch more work still to do, this won't be served right away. I put an ice bath under it and fold it around nice and easy to cool it off. Just gently reheat it before serving later on. On to the green thing. Just look at that. It's like from another planet. I've seen it before, and I saw it this time and couldn't resist buying it because I thought it would look weird yet cool on a plate. Here's what it's called, but basically it's just a member of the cauliflower family and tastes just like it. To me, it looks like something either alien or the texture of maybe a tail of a fantasy dragon or something. So anyways, we need to cook this thing, but I still want it to look like it does now and keep its color. So I carefully pull apart small to medium sized segments of it. I decided to steam it, so in goes all the pieces into the steamer. I didn't make all the pieces the same size, but I knew I was going to be picky and choosy later on which ones go on the plate, so it's going to affect the cooking time here. When the smaller ones were almost tender, I removed them straight into an ice bath. The ice bath shocks them so that they don't overcook and keeps the vibrant color. Now remember, whatever pieces we end up using will have to be reheated, and that will be done by setting an oven to 200 degrees and just gently reheating them right before serving. Same goes with the mushrooms, which, by the way, we have some oyster mushrooms, and we will get to those in just a minute because first we have to fry up our corn hair. Tiny pot and naturally some corn oil. I didn't have that much corn oil, so I used a bit of canola as well. When the oil is hot enough, add some hair. And be careful. I took it off the heat because it almost went crazy on me. If you use a tiny pot, make sure to have some quick thinking and reflexes. Stir it with chopsticks to separate it or it will stick together. You want it nice and golden. Pull it apart after frying. One more time here. It only takes about 60 seconds in the oil. Make sure to season it with a bit of salt when it comes out. Back to the mushrooms. I have oyster mushrooms here. They have a nice meaty taste and I want to get them crispy for some added texture. Carefully peel back on them from the cap and they will peel down all the way through the stem. The size of the mushrooms will determine how many strands you get out of each one. I want them all a similar size and thickness. They will shrink when they get cooked, so have more on hand than you think you might use. A saute pan gets some oil. I'm using some of the leftover oil from the corn hair and I added a touch of olive oil too. You want that pan almost to the smoke point so that when you add the mushrooms they fry fast. Just be Be patient as they cook. Spread them out in a pan and let them fry without stirring them up. I added some sprigs of thyme in. When you see some nice color on them and they start to look crispy, then you can move them around in the pan. It will take a few minutes for them to get crispy. When they were getting closer to being ready, I removed the thyme, then added about a teaspoon of red chili flakes. Once they're nice and crispy, they get removed from the pan and then seasoned as if they were French fries. In a pan goes some good quality butter. Melt it down on medium-high heat and add a bunch of thyme sprigs. Let it simmer for about 5 minutes, and not only will the butter be flavored nicely, but the thyme leaves will become crispy. Now, remember back at the beginning of the spicy chili series when I made the spicy chili oil? Well, this is the other batch of oil that is now much hotter. Beautiful color on that. I want to add heat to the dish, but I don't want it all to be spicy. So I take some of this stuff called Tapioca Maltodextrin and add a small amount to a bowl. What this stuff does is turn liquid fats into powder. So in very small amounts, add in your liquid fat, this case being spicy chili oil. Stirring with a fork, this will start to turn the oil into a powder. It dissolves fast in your mouth and leaves the flavor of whatever it's flavored with. Just keep adding the liquid fat in tiny amounts until you are satisfied with the consistency of it. Season it with some salt and pepper if you want. Make sure to taste it before using. So now that we have all of our components ready, the steak can be finished off and we can find a way to plate all of this. Okay, so since this dish required so much work, I think that we must give it a grade from A to F. I mean, if you are serious about playing around like this, you better be able to find your faults if you want to improve and also keep yourself in check. So I'll tell you my thoughts on this and what inspired me to make it like this. I wanted to do something a bit wild and unique. When I look at the Romanesco, if that's how you pronounce it, I think of an alien or a dragon. So I thought to make some kind of dragon's tail on the plate. I wanted it to be different yet tasty. First, the presentation and color. I think this definitely needed to be on a black plate or a very dark plate because of the bright colors. I didn't have a black plate, though I did order one and it hasn't arrived yet, but no excuses in the kitchen. The puree was a bit sloppily plated. I used a bit too much of it, I think, and was too careful trying to plate it, and it didn't have the swoosh effect that I wanted. It was uneven throughout and too thick. I had not intended the powder to be on the puree like that, but the color of it was too light to be aside by itself on the plate, I felt. I like the corn hair because to me, it reminds me of the whimsical beards that are associated with dragons and help the image out. The fillet is okay, but image-wise, a slice or two of pork tenderloin would be better considering the rest of the colors on the plate, but more on that when it comes to the taste. The Romanesco looked nice, but it was not over the top the way I intended. I should have, and had intended to, torch the pieces before plating. I ended up not doing that because I was concerned that after all that work that I might mess it up, but I really think I should have torched it a bit to bring out the scaly appearances. Next time I won't puss out like that. So for the grade on presentation and color, I'm going to give this a C-, I think. As far as the taste, I'll be honest, it did taste pretty good. However, as I said before with the pork tenderloin or even a pork chop, I think that with the other flavors on the plate, pork would have been a better choice. I mean, the filet was extremely delicious and cooked almost perfectly, and it did taste pretty good with the puree and everything else, but pretty good is not at all good enough for an overall dish. The chili oil powder got a bit masked because it was not on its own or with a dry element. The mushrooms were very, very good, but I should not have used the same fry oil as the corn hair. Each element needs its own distinct taste, and then they need to work together. The flavors of corn kind of overlapped everything instead of contrasting. The puree taste-wise was spot on, so no complaints there. And the Romanesco, well, if you were paying close attention, you noticed that nowhere did I ever season it with salt. I honestly just forgot. There was no salt in the thyme butter that I had brushed on. on it, so that element stood out as bland. And the corn hair, well, that was very good. It kind of has a popcorny taste to it. So overall, taste-wise, I'm gonna give it a C+. So the plate as a whole is a solid C for me. But anyways, I hope this encourages you to play around with your food in ways that you might not have done yet. Worst thing that can happen is to have to eat your own mistakes. Hopefully you learned at least one new technique from this video. Let me know what you think about this dish, and if you would also like to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.